This is the story of the Bible. This is the mission of God. And this is what we need to latch onto as believers if we're really going to be distinctly Christian. We need to understand what God has been doing throughout history and what He's working towards. When we know what God is working towards, but we don't really do anything about it, we're basically saying we don't care. A lot of people think they understand what the Bible is about and what it has for us, but I think a lot of people are missing the point of the Christian life. And I want to share with you what God is doing all throughout. What's up, Worldling fam? I'm excited to talk today about the Christian life, and I want to talk about a hot take about Christian life today. A lot of people think they understand what the Bible is about and what it has for us, but I think a lot of people are missing the point of the Christian life and don't really understand the Bible. And I want to walk through the Bible in about 3 minutes, and I want to share with you what God is doing all throughout. So let's starting with Genesis. We remember at the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He creates the Adam and Eve. He creates the garden, and He makes one rule. And the rule is, don't eat from this fruit, from this tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve sin, they disobey, they eat, and then at that moment, sin enters the world. Just because of one person, sin enters the world. And now everybody is infected with this sin. But God, right from the beginning, right in Genesis chapter 3, began crafting a plan. Actually, His plan was already set into motion at that moment to redeem the world. And so you start working through all of Genesis, you get to chapter 12, and that's where He selects a man named Abraham. And actually, at the time he was Abram, and God says, listen, I want to use you to become a great nation. I want to turn you into a nation that's going to bless all of the nations of the world. God selected one person to have descendants to create a nation that would reach out to the rest of the world. It wasn't all just about that nation. It was about reaching all of the people of the world. And the idea that God had for Israel was that He would have a relationship, like a father-son relationship with Israel. And He would bless Israel, and then with the blessings that they received, they were to distribute those blessings all throughout the world. But the problem was that Israel began to reject their role to bless the world. They began keeping the blessings that God gave all for themselves, and they became entitled. And so God sent messengers that are called prophets. He sent them to Israel to say, listen, you guys are not doing what you were supposed to do, and not only that, but you're becoming more like the other nations. Instead of influencing the other nations in a good way, they're influencing you, and you're worshiping other gods, and you're disobeying. And they said, listen, you need to stop that. But they didn't. Israel didn't listen, and so God sent discipline upon His people to try to bring them back on track. And after that discipline through exile happened, God brought them back. He brought them back to the land, and He said, listen, my son is coming soon. You didn't listen to the prophets, but my son Jesus is coming to the world soon, and you need to be ready. You need to be ready. There's 100 prophecies that were given hundreds of years before Jesus arrived that pinpointed that He would arrive. And He did. He came right on the schedule. And when He came, the people of Israel, again, were not ready. They weren't ready to receive Him. And they actually rejected Him, and they crucified Him, even though He hadn't done anything wrong. But the best part was that Jesus knew that was happening, knew that was going to happen, and He still stayed. He still was willing to go to the cross. And then 3 days later, He rose from the grave. This is something you might say, well, how do you know for a fact that He rose? There's actually a lot of evidence that supports the fact that He rose from the grave. There's eyewitnesses who saw Him as well. There's a lot that say that He rose from the grave. And it's actually imperative for Christianity that He rise from the grave, because He conquered death. And if He had not conquered death, then our faith would not be valid. But He rose from the grave, And then, after so many people had seen him, he ascended into heaven, and he is waiting. And God began his plan of working through the church to bring all of the nations to come to trust Christ. And that's the place where we are right now, awaiting Jesus' return. But the Bible also talks about Jesus' return. And if you look at towards the end of the New Testament, it talks about this time when Jesus will come back, and when he'll judge all of those who've rejected him and continue in sin, and when he'll usher in the kingdom that will be a blessing to those who are here in this world who have trusted Christ, and those who have passed who've trusted Christ as well. And then ultimately, what God is doing is he will bring about a new redeemed earth that will be like the Garden of Eden, but here will be also sinless, and it will be a perfect environment. We will be perfectly fulfilled. We'll never have pain. We'll never have need, anything like that. God is doing all of this, and even though what was lost years ago, or thousands and thousands of years ago in the Garden of Eden, God is working to bring that about. And the way that God, this is what we call the mission of God. And the mission of God is to work so that everybody can know him and everybody can be fulfilled in God. He desires that for everyone. And if he's doing all of this all throughout the Bible, we need to help to make known who God is. That's what he wants us to do. He wants us to make known who God is and what he wants to do in our lives. He wants to develop our lives. He wants to produce in us love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. This is the fruit of the Spirit. And that's what God wants to produce in us. And he wants to prepare us for that which is to come in eternity, for spending an eternity with God. This is the story of the Bible. This is the mission of God. And this is what we need to latch onto as believers if we're really going to be distinctly Christian. We need to understand what God has been doing throughout history and what he's working towards. When we know what God is working towards, but we don't really do anything about it, we're basically saying we don't care. If I had a dad who every evening comes home from work and he's in his garage working on cars, the best way to get to know my dad would be to go out and work on the car with him. But if I never do that, if I never work with him on the car, knowing what he's doing all the time, it's almost like I'm making a statement. I really don't care about what you do, and I don't really care about spending time with you. The best way that we can become closer with God and more useful for the mission of God is to spend time with him doing what he's doing. When we offer ourselves up to God saying, listen, I want to go, send me. Like what Isaiah says in Isaiah chapter 6, he says, God, here am I, send me. I want to be useful. When we say that to God, God says, I can use people like you. It doesn't matter what your skill set is. It doesn't matter what your experience is. I delight in using people for my glory who desire to be a blessing. That's what he wanted for Israel, and Israel rejected it. He said, I want to bless you so that the blessing can go throughout. And he says that to us today. In fact, in Romans 11, it talks about this. God says Paul is writing in this part, but he says, listen, Israel was supposed to cause other nations to be jealous about the relationship they had with God and that they would come into that relationship. But Israel rejected that. And so God has kind of put him in time out for the time being, and he's working through the church in hopes that Israel will get jealous of the relationship that God has with the church, and that they will come back and fulfill the purpose that God had for them from the beginning of that nation. And so God seeks out people and people groups that want to be a blessing. That's who he wants to work through. That's who he wants to bring about blessing to others. And let me tell you something from experience. One of the greatest blessings that we can experience is offering ourselves up to God and for God to work through us. You will be blessed beyond what you ever thought was possible. So, Now that you know the story, the thread that goes all throughout the Bible, now that you understand better what God is doing, I want to encourage you, get going, wherever it is, even if it's at work, if it's at school, if it's in your family, maybe it's going on a mission trip throughout the world and being a blessing in different parts of the world where people don't know anything about Jesus. Whatever it is, start asking the questions, start praying and saying, God, where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? And help me to do it. And God's going to use you in awesome ways. Thank you so much for being here today. I want to ask you to subscribe to our channel. We've got a lot of content coming here in the future, and we're super excited to share that with you. And if you want to know more about what we're doing at WorldLink Ministries, hit us up on our website, wlink.org. You can check out what we're doing around the world, and if you want to be involved, we're here for it. All right? Thanks so much. We'll talk to you next time.